I would like to begin by providing two concepts that distinguish the focus of this study. It is so important so that we are not confused what we are talking about here. Because in this morning, I think there are many key concepts that thrown at us, such as efficiency versus productivity. And this is one such concept that requires clarification so deeply that we are very clear about the scope of our interest here. So when we talk about efficiency, basically, we would like to maintain the output by reducing the input. That's efficiency. So for those who have some financial background, you will be interested in increasing gross profit margin. And coming back to our study, the focus is on productivity, which is about providing optimal inputs so that you could increase the output from your farm. That is productivity. And likewise, that can also lead to higher gross profit margin if that is your ultimate interest. So I think that is very clear. We just focus on productivity here. We focus on what is considered as the optimal input. And the second concept that we have to clarify here is that what do we mean by technology? Because basically, especially after the episode of COVID-19, everyone begins to talk about agriculture technology, or what is more familiar to you is AgTech or Agri-Tech. Basically, that refers to modern technology in smart farming. But we are in the oil palm cultivation. We are well aware it is not just that. So for that reason, the scope of this study is expanded to look at both practices as well as technologies. So let's set that as our background so that I could move on to have a very productive discussion with you today. Now, a lot has been said about the stagnated yield, while land expansion is no longer that feasible because of the changing policy as well as the changing environmental concern in the trade policy. But just how bad it is when we look at our stagnated yield, many of them are not aware we have gone back to the stage where we begin in 1980s when the African weaver pollinator was introduced. There's how bad it is if you look at our yield today. So we are having between 15 to 17 tons per hectare on average. And you'll be surprised, even some big boys that you admire, they also are having that kind of experience right now. So this issue spans beyond smallholders. But we have to come back to the very fundamental of the history, if you understand it, that many smallholders actually learned a lot from big boys. If you come back to the case of Malaysia, it is even more clearer to us that the plantations, they set themselves up as estates before smallholders get a chance to witness the success of this industry so that they emulate and then to expand the land for their livelihood. But today, if you look at Malaysia, like I said earlier, you don't see much difference between the yield on average between big boys and the small boys. We are having about 16 or 17 tons probably this year. There's no much difference there. Whereas in the case of Indonesia, you will find a more glaring difference between estates versus smallholders. The smallholders, because the data you provided at the national level is extracted palm oil. So it is assumed the extraction rate is equal between smallholders and big guys. So what you see in the gap here is basically the estates, they have been performing very well, even during stages of downturn. And soon after that, they recovered and they continue to leap and bound. Whereas smallholders, they continue to stuck there. So this brings us to the interest of this study. By nature, then it becomes reflective. What that means is that we would like to look at what estates have been doing and we would like to learn from them. So we go back to the trail of the history and the path dependence follows. Well, you might be a little bit worried about this. Of course, I implant the word worry because then you feel worried. But if you use your phone nowadays, you type a word and then another word follows, right? The computer suggests to you what then you should apply here. That is the methodology when we analyze this case, and it is exactly just like what we call as natural language learning, or in other words, you call it machine learning here, so that we identify how the practices or technologies, they are correlated with each other. And our main interest here is to study what have been reported by plantation companies in their sustainability reports. And I think there are some listed plantation companies here today, and they are well aware it is their responsibility to provide information on what they have done and what they have not done, and what are their risks and what they are supposed to do. So it has become increasingly transparent when it comes to information sharing. So on that basis, we conducted such an analysis so that we understand what are the structures of practices and technologies the estate companies have deployed. And it doesn't surprise us, basically, because the work is so structured that you begin with plantation establishment, and then you follow by diagnosis to inform your agronomic practices. And what really stood up among all these structures is actually a new cluster called adaptation to climate change, which has not been touched much up to today. So what we did was that we correlate, sorry, I have to use the layman term, correlate. We link the practices and technologies to the results of their productivity. So you'll find that the color actually tells us something about how certain practices and technologies contribute, although not directly, to their farm productivity. Those closer and beyond the green color and then to the red suggest that they are more productive than others. But we don't want to just to look at just that, because what we are interested in here is that what are some of the common practices and technologies these estate companies deploy, so that the smallholders could also learn from them. And you'll be surprised, the big clusters or the big circles that you'll find here, a lot of them are about nutrient recycling using biomasses. So EFB, empty fruit bunch, land irrigation using palm oil meal effluent, and it even involves palm sludge. But then the question is this: how many of these biomasses are available to smallholders? Ask yourself. It is not equal. The ground is not equal. And I think Mr. Jono just provided a good background that, even if you would like to use it, the land typology might not allow you to do so. It could be very challenging and costly. Now, I think generally there is a consensus that, well, Malaysia and Indonesia will learn from each other. Then you look at the estate setup between these countries, you'll find that it is very interesting. The estate companies in Malaysia, they have done much more and more advanced in terms of technologies. Then you go back to look at Indonesia again. How many red circles do you find? And then Malaysia again. Okay. Of course, this is very easy by looking at them. But what is not easy to be understood here is that what do they actually tell us? Because if you look at the Indonesian case, basically the correlation between the structure matters a lot. So in Indonesia, we use a lot of diagnostic tools and technologies to inform agronomic practices. What that means is that things like foliar analysis, things like soil properties analysis, to tell you what kind of fertilizers are appropriate to your farm. Isn't that fundamental? But if you look at the link here, basically that happened in Indonesia. Malaysia has done something extra. They use the diagnostic tools and technologies not just to inform fertilizer application, but also to inform the plantation setup and design. So how many trees you should plant? And increasingly, estates are also exploring agroforestry here, and they begin to notice that even by reducing the density, you also can maintain the productivity. Well, a lot of things are evolving here, and we are very curious. So we went to ask experts, I mean, real experts who have 40, 50 years of R&D experience here. And I asked them a very simple question to follow up. Could you recommend very fearful but respectful competitors that you would like me to interview them? If you are not interviewed, don't be afraid because you are a friend to them. So I asked them, who are the people that you think they are insightful, knowledgeable, and they are very, very pro smallholder setup? So what they provided to us was very clear. You know, we split it into a matrix between profitability, I think Mr. Jono mentioned that, and compatibility, which means that it has to fit to the current practices, farm setup, as well as the culture and the lifestyle of smallholders. That's what we call compatibility here. So generally, what you find here is that they are split into two areas, the top right, as well as the bottom left here. Well, this is quite a surprising finding, actually. And this result is consistent between Indonesia and Malaysia. For the sake of simplicity, we just make one graph to show that. So to help us with that, I draw 4 circles here. So basically, we find 4 small clusters between these recommended practices and technologies. And you'll be surprised. When you look at the first circle, basically it's something that should have been done, but may not be been done appropriately or correctly. So it's about replanting when you need to replant using the modern varieties, whether we are talking about disease-resistant, climate tolerant, or high yielding. Basically, they are modern varieties. And then if you look at the other components in the first cluster, it also includes, surprisingly, a very simple thing that we always ask smallholders not to do. Do not clean the land. Maintain your soft grass, especially in the case of drought, especially now in Indonesia. I think many of you are having that kind of feeling. And the good thing about making sure your soil is moist enough so that you could apply fertilizer effectively and take advantage of the market prices, especially during droughts, prices tend to rise. Then why so many smallholders are not doing that?
Dr. Tay, you have 3 minutes.
Yeah, I'm closing. Then the second is about GAP as well. The third cluster and fourth cluster, they are basically interrelated. But it's just that it is a more modern technologies when it comes to cluster 4 to do the job of cluster 3. Now, if you look at this kind of segregation, then you begin to think, and probably I think you already have the answer. It's about digitalization. But what do we understand about digitalization, basically? Because we are now operating in a highly complex environment. And it is not something very complex. To be frank with you, it's not something very complex. Although I just said it is increasingly complex, but it's not to the far extent that we cannot understand the complexity. So basically, the whole thing is simple, but certainly not easy. When you need to replant, you need to replant. For those who are still in the productive stage, you need to focus on your proper harvesting discipline. And then you begin to think deeper about your fertilizer program. Is it well enough to adapt to the changing climate? And followed by very fundamental soil and water conservation practices. And this is where I think Mr. Jono and I think our Nash also mentioned about digitalization. Here, I just want to dig slightly deeper into that because when we say about digitalization, we have to be very clear of the scope. And especially now, we are very much attracted to traceability. But here, I would like to focus on decision support systems through digitalization. And that is basically not just to inform you about fertilizer application, but also to inform you about the weather changes, plus your monitoring on your yield response. So how many of these have been done by smallholders? If we ask ourselves, these are very fundamentals, right? And these are recommended by our experts. So what we do here is basically coming back to the fundamental, and I think Nash made a very bold recommendation about GAP. If you ask those experts, when they say GAP, they say fertilizer, fertilizer, fertilizer. And fertilizer has to work in a very conducive way For example, you must have certain level of rainfall during that month so that your nitrogen is not emitted. So things like that need very, very careful understanding of the nutrient cycle here. Nutrients can run off. This is where you lose it. But other than that, if you can recover as much as possible from your external suppliers, then you are in a very good shape to just replenish certain percentage of your nutrient loss. And for those who are very well disciplined, you have a privilege to understand that for the crops to flower and then you harvest the fruit, it can take up to 4 years' time. So what does that tell us? You need a very, very good discipline here. You cannot simply, because prices go up, then you just apply more fertilizer. It doesn't work that way, because the yield potential works on discounting factors. So if you don't have water, then you are discounted. If you don't apply fertilizers, you get even further discount. This, Madam Teo, this is a friend of a friend, right? A very typical grandma, not highly educated, but have a very good fundamental understanding of the needs of the crops. Her basic formula, fertilizer. When I need to work on the farm, I need to work on the farm. Because it doesn't work that way. For many years, and in fact decades, we've been told, tanam tunggu tuai. You know, is this perfect? I think it's coming to haunt us actually. And if you look at it, this is basically a linear process. And what's fearful is that the worse result that you get, the weaker your psychology is, and it's going to be infectious and affect your other friends in the community. So what I recommend here is a shift in the mindset so that we begin to look at tanam, tata, tanggap, and toy. So it is a cycle on its own. I'm not going to elaborate. I think you understand this very well. And I just would like to have you to take that away from me. Thank you.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for the coming from this event. It's really honor to me to be able to be present lesson learned or pilot program from the smallholders back to more than 10 decades that I experienced involved in smallholders engagement across in Indonesia mostly and some of the rest of countries. So please let me know, please allow to me to be able to present the topic that's really honestly to quite hard to me to be able to recommendation to government in terms of how to what the government can do to assist the smallholders towards improving their efficiency and productivity, hence income. So essentially that's the lesson learned pilot plan that already involved in several countries, several districts in Indonesia, how to smallholder voice that I try to quote the smallholder's voice on the ground, how to elaborate to enhance how to engage what the smallholder needs in the grassroots. So that's the basic general information. As we know, the smallholders in Indonesia, especially quite have challenge in terms of how to there are some gaps more than 200% moving forward for the private sector. So more or less 1.2 ton per hectare per month. It's quite significant low to how to reach the numbers of the quote unquote the ideal conditions like the 3 or 4 ton per month per hectare. So this kind of the basically the percentage of the land of the owners, smallholders, and the private sectors is, as the Pak Jono mentioned in the previous experience, 40%, more than 40% is coming from the smallholders landowners, and the rest of the private sector and the states under land of private sectors in Indonesia. So why that I concern and try to assist the smallholders context is how to dealing with at least they have some the similar productivity to create more increase in terms of the production of the FFB productions. So based on that concern on the data, I try to more understand how to exactly smallholders need in the ground. So essentially, it's how to recommendation and consideration of the government, both of Indonesian, Malaysia, or Honduras, or the Papua New Guinea to more building the connection or collaboration between the smallholders, Indonesian smallholders, and the rest of the stakeholders like the private sector, government, civil society, on the or the association of the smallholders. So that's the several or some of the informations or how to voice of smallholders. Some of the independent smallholders coming from Jambi, Riau, and North Sumatra, Indonesia, there are some quite challenge in terms of how to improvement the welfare of the technology and land ownerships. So I try to highlight the smallholders' needs to more create up to now government's effort to develop plantation have succeed in increase area and production, but have not yet a significant effect on improving farmer welfare, not enough. The limitation of farmers in land ownership technology and lack of access ownership technology and lack of market have placed individual farmers in disadvantageous positions and they suffer the most. So that's the quote or highlight coming from the smallholders in Riau, Jambi, and North Sumatra. It's a random sampling that I involve across in Indonesia. So these pictures coming, I take a picture from the one of the district in West Kalimantan, Sintang district, West Kalimantan province, Indonesia. Essentially, that's need support and help and assist in regards to the certainty of land legality and FFB price. So that's essential to smallholders needs to how to certainty of the land ownership and the high price of FB, as well as the price difference between those who have implemented sustainable palm oil and those who have not. So the smallholders need to differentiate a price between that already implemented of the sustainable palm oil practice like ISPO or the MSPO, RSPO, and those who have not to implement the sustainable palm oil. So, and also companies or mills support for the partnership and data collection of the independent smallholders. I mean, for the second of the needs in terms of how to collecting the data, mapping or the how to set or building of the farmers formations, farmers information, and financial access for the smallholders. So this is coming from the independent smallholders in West Kalimantan province, Indonesia. So these pictures I take for the photo in the West Kalimantan province, how to agriculture extension officers or penyuluh pertanian lapangan in Indonesia try to empower and build the support of the smallholders in the grassroots. So essentially, as the other regions, smallholders, farmers in Indonesia mostly are the main actors in upstream industry. The problem is the productivity is very low, 9 to 30 tons FFB per ton per year, or roughly 0.9 to 1.2 ton per hectare per month. Limited access to legally state land and limited appropriate legal plantation business licenses. Other challenges included an inability or limited desire to invest in agro inputs like the fertilizer or chemical on etc. Due to the low perceived benefits obtained from investment in terms of FFB price. Therefore, training and mentoring activities are critical to change behavior, understanding and planning for the smallholders in oil palm crop management. So this activity essentially to try to empower the smallholders in the limited access like the sub village and the sub districts. So this is one of the key actor in smallholders in West Kalimantan. Still in West Kalimantan, in Kapuas Hulu district, West Kalimantan, Indonesia. At first, he thought to. At first, I decided not to take part in the Independent Smallholders for Palm Oil program, as I didn't not really see the need and could not imagine how it would add any value for me. I felt I could do this on my own. However, I made mistakes, had this satisfactory result and was not able to find the errors myself. I then become curious and decide to join a few meetings. So essentially, it's take to build partnership and build the trust in the first steps is really critical. How to engage extensively in the smallholders, village government, and the rest of the village part official government to how to embrace smallholders in the first place, and that's why that I did in the 7 or 10 years ago to try to embrace them in the try to engage more and more, roughly to 7 to 8 weeks to enhance the engagement of the smallholders participations program. So this is a quite interest to me to be able how to EUDR can take this part. So essentially, some of local organizations in Indonesia, as well as the Smallholders Forum in Indonesia, they said to how to enable the EUDR transform. I would say transform meaning to including the independent smallholders, inclusive due diligence. As we know, EUDR mandated or required the due diligence, and the Smallholders Forum taught to me how to create more and more, at least 30%. For example, several farmers inclusion models that can be considered in the EUDR operators give priority to import of oil palm containing independent smallholders at least 30%. So that means if we including the FFB products coming from the smallholders at least 30%, that's the operators in EUDR can consider, and we have to collaboration more and more in terms of how to embrace the inclusion of smallholders in the EUDR initiative. Also, I would like to highlight from the Smallholders Forum, if the EU gives the priority to farmers' products in the EU market, then this will be encourage companies to proactive in involving small farmers. Apart from that, it will also encourage the governments to take important steps through national and local regulation, as well as the certification encourage relations between companies and independent smallholders. And EUDR transform is one of the new terms or new idea. It's more discussed further, but essentially is more involved independent smallholders, inclusiveness, due diligence. It's one of the highlight that smallholders forum. So the rationale of the preconditions to government can support the smallholders is for
Mr. Rico, you have 2 minutes.
yes, noted. Thank you so much, Puan. So the four of the elements of the enabling conditions to government support and commitment support to effective smallholder supports. The four key area is legality and land certainty, productivity and organizational management, financial capital and equity, and the last part of the sustainability is focus leave no one behind approach. It's more critical and more essential to effective smallholder supports coming from government as well as the related stakeholders across the globe. So how the government could support the independent smallholders? I try to provide the three options that will be more structured. Maybe we can discuss further in terms of the three of the options. The first one is smallholders support system frameworks elements. It's 5 frameworks. It's really more structured in terms of how to enabling environment until to monitoring and evaluation learning. So it's more structured to helping smallholders in the more structured ways. The second option is pillars of smallholders based agricultural transformation. Is essentially is transform coming from the productivity until to risk mitigations. Is how to certainty of the FFB price from the private sector or the government itself. So it's really the other structure of the approach. The third one option is provide incentive frameworks. I try provide the 4 elements of the benefit, indirect and indirect monetary benefits coming from the, let's say, for example, in the second incentive, in-kind goods and services, for example to inputs, technology, innovations, physical infrastructure, investment in social infrastructure, and so on and so forth. And the facility investment is really more focused in the training facility, group formation, and so on and so forth.
Mr. Rico, please wrap up the presentation.
So I try to there is no single that incentive and support which can solve the challenges at once, but combination and collaboration to incentive and support can be helpful in engaging smallholders to increase their performance. So thank you very much, and this that I can share to all of you. Thank you.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Firstly, the Honorable Dr. Musdalifah Mahmud, Senior Advisor for Connectivity Service Sector and Natural Resources in the Coordinating Ministry for Economic Affairs of Republic of Indonesia. Dr. Rizal Afandi Lukman, Secretary General of COPC. Datuk Najib Wahab, Deputy Secretary General of CPOPC. Mr. Francis Galia Maneke, Minister of Oil Palm of Papua New Guinea. Other honorable and distinguished guests, smallholders and palm oil industry players in Indonesia, Malaysia, Papua New Guinea, Honduras, and other countries. I would like to express my sincere thanks to CPOPC, especially for having us. Just want to explain a bit of what we are today. Actually, I'm heading SD Gatri AgriBio. Okay, I'd just like to point out our business establishment, the technological and scientific discoveries, palm oil plantation technology, and agribio's involvement in Malaysian smallholders industry. So there's a short video to be played. So I'll let the secretariat to actually run the video. It's just a short one. Okay, that's me and my establishment. As the Gatri Agribio, previously known as Gatri Agribio or Saimdabi Plantation Agribio previously. It was founded in 1982. The company stands at the forefront of agricultural innovations. We had a rebranding exercise done quite recently. Datuk Najib was there and a few other guests or so. And this signifies a renewed dedication to boosting the agricultural productivity and sustainability through advanced and eco-friendly technologies. Our products and services, if you can see up here, actually we are the prime mover and the market leader in Malaysia for rat baits and harvesting tools. So we are actually the pioneers also, if I can say it correctly. Okay, other than that, we have the Banawal boxes, not the usual Banawal boxes, but they are actually a DIY type. And the Benjoni mulch, it's a biodegradable mulch sheet. And of course, we are also now dealing with agrochemicals. Other than that, we have the RB pheromone. RB pheromone is made in Costa Rica. And actually, it's one of the patented products of Saimdabi previously. And it's over 20 years now. The other thing that is new in store right now is actually the machine specialist. Previously, I have to admit that Malaysia relies a lot on foreign labor, and this has been giving us quite a tough time, especially during COVID. And to recover after COVID is also another uphill task. And our company has embarked into this program to actually hire locals to operate machines. We rely a lot on technology. Okay, and they are called machine specialists. And of course, to supplement that, our company now is dealing with battery-powered agriculture machines. I will explain this a bit lengthy on this. Okay, just to share with you that the agriculture always rely on new technology. To quote Fritz Haber, discovery of ammonia synthesis in 1908 and led to the modern fertilizer, the nitrogen-based. And of course, without the scientific and technological advancement, the food supply will not be sufficient to feed the current world population of 6 billion. Okay, this is just to share the scenario, the changing industry scenario. Of course, 50% of planted areas in Indonesia, I think it's more or less there from what we gathered from the statistics department. And the combination of good agricultural practices and technological assistance resulted in better yield for plantation of 6 metric tons per hectare. But the smallholders seems to be making half of that. So this is something, an area that we all can collaborate and work together to improve. Okay. If you all know, in Malaysia last time, back in the early 80s, we rely a lot on bamboos. So Saimdabi came up with the aluminum poles to actually replace the bamboos as the harvesting harvesting equipment, harvesting tools. So the industry moved away from the bamboo harvesting poles to aluminum harvesting poles in 1983. Guthrie Agribio was the first to actually introduce the aluminum harvesting poles and is now the market leader. And we're also selling this in Indonesia. Okay, next, we also started the drone spraying service to the company internally. And we did quite extensively the point-to-point spraying to actually address the labor shortage right after COVID, the pandemic. And of course, the cost is very expensive. And we've actually scaled it down now. I have to admit that because of the cost at the moment is not sustainable. And of course, there are technological improvements thereon that we have to actually look at. And let's see how it goes as we move on. Of course, the one in the middle, this is actually something that our machine specialist is actually operating right now. It's called mechanized terrace fertilizer applicator with the HFL, which is actually Hasrul fertilizer lift for manuring works. This is performed by our machine specialist. So instead of having 4 or 5 people to actually do the manuring, we only operate with one person operating the machine. And the other one, of course, to actually operate the HFL bins. The next one is actually to complement our red bait products. It's actually the mechanized red bait applicator or MERBA. This is for the rodenticide campaigns that we do every year, twice a year. And rather than doing the replacement baiting method, we are doing the multiple baiting. We shoot the baits to the palm trees. This is also done by our machine specialists. Of course, there are a few others that if I mention, this will be very long and lengthy, such as the STGO, IFM, MFM, IHMS, and others. All right, the interesting one now. This is the game changer that we are doing now. It's actually, it goes back to the same 3-wheeler machines that most plantation companies use. This is a very good value proposition that we have here today. It's called ILASA. This is actually an EV machine. It's for small infield FFB and loose fruit evacuation. It's cheaper to run compared to diesel. You can see right there, the graphs there. It's maybe a bit small for everyone to see. And if anyone wants the information, you can always get from the Secretariat. Especially now, I think the government, our government, Malaysian government has just announced the increase in diesel price. No more subsidy for us. So I would like to maybe ask Encik Sophie to how are you addressing this with our smallholders in Malaysia? Yeah, of course, logically, the effects will be like 55% because of $1.20 per liter increase from the previous price that we are now. So using a battery-powered machines will be the most logical thing to do now. So it's something that everybody has to think about. And of course, there were concerns earlier that the battery doesn't last long and all that. But it seems that our partner who's actually producing the batteries for us is from China. It comes in cells and whatnot. But the main thing is the battery management system is the key to actually sort of breakthrough that we have right now, because it can actually last almost 25 hours. Okay, it actually helps to lower your carbon footprint. And if you have all those programs in respect of conserving the environment, net zero, carbon neutral things and all that, this will be something that can actually help. All right. And okay, what we're doing also right now is actually, we don't encourage as much to sell the battery powered machines, but we rent them to you. So it's no frills, simple. We provide the service. At any time there's an issue, we come and actually, because it's there's no maintenance needed in terms of changing oil and doing overhaul to the engine and whatnot. If the battery goes faulty, we just change the battery right away. Something like that. Okay. And of course, what's we have in store next is actually to have solar powered charging stations as well. We're working on that. Okay. So this is actually towards the greener technology. This is my team, part of my team, I guess. Okay, our involvement in this Malaysian smallholders industry, the figures actually is from the Indonesian website. So it's actually million means with a point. It's actually 3.6 million hectares. So you have to translate that. So actually, if you look at it, the independent smallholders represent about 986,000 hectares. Okay, this is what we do. We've actually engaged with the smallholders in our way, because of course we are also commercially driven, but at the same time we have to share what we know, what we have, and all that to the practices that we have, so that it will be a win-win thing with our clients and whatnot. So we do our information sharing in classroom, indoor, field demonstrations, post interaction events, update via social media and WhatsApp channels. And we have actually set up what we call an AgriBio Smallholders Club. So it's a loose thing, but then what we do is we share every now and then information with the smallholders. And we offer at the same time free advisory, free of charge road shows targeting minimum 30 per road shows. And we're targeting like 20 sites per year. And of course, agronomy advisory, and of course, continuous education program for the smallholders. Because in my team, they are also part of the bigger SD Gatri Berhad team, formerly as Saindabi Plantation Berhad. All right. And with the involvement in Malaysian smallholders industry, our business and operational targets is for revenue growth, market penetration, profitability, product quality, sustainability, diversification. Operational will be the productivity, trading and capacity building, infrastructure development, supply chain efficiency, technology integration, community engagement, and also, of course, at the same time, risk
You
management.
have 2 minutes.
Thank you, Dr. Paul. Okay, I'm almost there. All right. We also have this thing. It's as part of our risk management. Because of course, smallholders will have the tendency to have issues in payment and whatnot. So here, maybe the idea is to work with KUDs, the Koperasi Unit Daerahs and whatnot. And of course, in Malaysia, we are actually collaborating with our OCP unit. We're doing sort of the barter trade arrangement. The value proposition that we have is, of course, the battery powered machines, the green energy carbon reduction thing, the Benjoni mulch itself, which is actually meant to you reduce, use less fertilizer, maintain the moisture in the ground and whatnot, and also lesser usage of agrochemicals for young palms. It's biodegradable things and control weed growth with minimal maintenance, induce palm vegetative growth, reduce fertilizer application rounding costs, prevent fertilizer and soil erosion, okay, and increase early yield of oil palm, prevent phytotoxicity from herbicide spraying, attach well to soil and increase fertilizer absorption. All right, so this is our journey. First year, we're doing the membership registration, provide initial farming inputs, collect baseline data on farming practices and yields, implementation by the targeted smallholders, and then for the next midterm 5 years, support crop growth and maintenance, increase average yield, connect with the smallholders with local and regional markets, develop cooperatives for better market access, invest in infrastructure like irrigation, storage, and transportation. Of course, the long shot will be the 10 years. Ensure the sustainable farming practices for 80 to 100% of the smallholders in Malaysia, for instance, and achieve a 100% increase in smallholder incomes, improve access to education, healthcare, and essential services, enhance resilience to climate change and market fluctuations. All right, and for that, I end my presentation.
Any questions? Yes, Tuan Haji, please.
Thank you very much. You see, when you look at the supply of demand of palm oil, we talk about smallholders. So the smallholders are the supplier. The demand are the overseas. You look at 3P concept: the profit, planet, and prosperity. Okay. So when the buyer, the demand, they are looking on the planet. Okay, but here we are the supplier, we are looking at the people. So we are focusing on the people. The supplier, the demand focus on the planet. So we are also looking at the planet, but more toward the people. So this is the competition. So when we introduce the technology know-how to the smallholders, so these are the basic things that in the smallholders mind. We are talking about profit. We are capitalism. We are still a social capitalist. We are still in the what they call it a capitalist market. Whereas the world are in social capitalism. So these are two contradicting stages where we have to really address. So in this case, I think as a smallholders, when we were exposed to innovation, people are selling the innovation to us by giving all the facilities. For example, like SD Bio, you are giving all the facility to introduce your for investment, your what they call it, your product, and then the smaller will buy the product. That's what we are thinking. Because you are more thinking like capitalism. You are not thinking about social capitalism. So these are the things that I think the basic principle concept of social capitalism now should be in the new technology. So that's why I come in terms of that adaptability of the technology. The smaller cannot get it because like SD Bio, you come out with a good technology, but at the end of the day, yes, with your support, they will do it. So what I think here that should be integrated management system in terms of technology. I mean, what SD Bio is doing is good. You have to cluster all these models under your umbrella, then you introduce that system, and you have to manage it from A to Z. That's what I think. Because we are talking about productivity. Productivity should be looked at oil per hectare, not as FFB per hectare. It's wrong. Because if FFB per hectare, I'm producing a lot of a good FFB, 3 or 15 ton, 14 ton. If I don't get the OER, zero. This is the problem. So you can see the mill technology never change. You are focusing on small orders, but the mill technology never change until now. This is the problem. You can see they can give a flat OER. I mentioned this now. Flat OER, we are getting 25 ton, 30 ton. If they are getting 13 or they are getting 18% OER, oil loss at 1 or 2%, there is no activity, there is no productivity at all. So this is the whole concept of we are looking on oil per hectare productivity. And you have to look at this, how you want to promote in terms of the social capitalism, not capitalism as first day. Thank you very much. No question, just a comment.
No question, just a comment, but does any of the panel would like to respond to that comment?
Tuan Haji, thanks for the challenging thoughts actually, but it's logical actually. Our task here is to actually bridge the interests, although they might be contradictory. I would like to use the case of Indonesia because it's far easier to elaborate here. You have half a size of your planted area by smallholders. So if you are able to increase your FFB yield by 10% at the national level, I mean, this is just calculation, right? You get 5% increment in your annual output. So that just put it that way that it is inelastic when it comes to changes in input. Okay, what that means is that 10% increment in your input, but for the national interest, you only get 5% increment. So the question now is that how do you then optimize this kind of economic structure? So I cannot think of other way if we continue asking smallholders to invest in mechanization, automation. I know a lot of proponents are here about it, but we would like to think about the economic reality of it. I think Mr. Jono put up a very good picture that smallholders, they talk about livelihood, which is made up of how much they receive from the farm, how much is deducted, and then how much is saved. So that's the reality. So if we invert that kind of formula, then if we could get smallholders to begin think about their investor capital is actually very limited compared to plantation companies, then they will begin to open their eyes. So for whatever inputs, then we recommend to them through, if possibly, a decision support system, digital decision support system, then they are not investing anything in infrastructure, in machinery. We are just merely providing information to help them make better decision so that they could optimize their input acquisition, input application, and as well as labor allocation. Believe me, when you have a high yielding farm, even laborers are happy to go to your farm and harvest for you compared to the very limited yield area, because they have to walk so far just to collect a few fruits compared to your farm, which is highly productive. So it makes economic sense if you come back to the economic structure to consider the reality of how to improve the productivity of the farm. So we have to be very well aware of the economic structure there.
Thank you, Dr. Teh. Is there any other questions? Oh, there are one more question.
Terima kasih. Kami pakai bahasa Indonesia, Bu, karena memang kami kebun peladang sawit yang selalu di kebun.
Disilakan, Pak.
Oke, thank you. Sedikit aja thank you. Jadi begini, Pak. Saya mau ke Bapak Riko, Pak. Kebetulan saya dari Asosiasi Petani Kelapa Sawit Kalimantan Barat, Bu. Sepadan kami langsung dengan Malaysia, Bu. Jadi ketika harga dulu jatuh di Indonesia Rp700, petani kami bondong-bondong jual ke Malaysia. Itu perlu diingat, sejarah bahwa hancurnya harga TBS bukan dari petani, Pak. Hancurnya harga sawit bukan dari petani. Dari mana? Regulasi pemerintah kita yang tidak jelas. Tutup sana, tutup sini. Ini kenyataan, Pak, Bu, kenyataan. Kami melakukannya, kami melaksanakan karena kami di kebun. Dan alhamdulillah sudah diundang ke sini pun sudah syukur alhamdulillah bisa ketemu dengan pembesar-pembesar, pemikir-pemikir dan lain-lain. Jadi kembali ke kita, saya tidak tahu Bapak ini dari perusahaan atau dari NGO atau dari mana. Kita dari Kapuas Hulu juga, Pak, keliling. Kami di Kalbar keliling. Tapi keliling kita mengadvokasi salah satunya adalah bibit sawit harus jelas. Kita bicara mau peningkatan pupuk ini, tapi kalau bibitnya tidak jelas, produsen kita beli kecambah atau beli bibitnya tidak jelas, hancur, Bu. Tidak bisa juga kita mengandalkan. Bagaimana mau produktivitas tinggi? Bagaimana mau pembinaan kepada kami sebagai petani? Kami image kami petani, Pak. Mungkin kami generasi kedua. Kalau generasi pertama bibit tanaman sawit yang jatuh dari pokoknya di perusahaan itu bagus. Kita tanam. Nah, pemikiran kami yang kedua itu tidak bisa seperti itu, sekarang harus beli. Jadi advokasi itu saya pikir tadi menggiring opini kami petani sawit itu seperti generasi pertama, digiringnya di hulu terus. Bagaimana caranya ini seperti berhasil? Kenapa tidak kita berpikir sekarang ke hilir? Produktivitas itu petani punya perkumpulan petani punya sekelas kilang atau pabrik mini yang memang ramah lingkungan. Kita sudah ada contoh di Jambi dengan di daerah lain, di Sumut kalau nggak salah, itu ramah lingkungan pabriknya. Karena ramah lingkungan, Eropa sana tetap mengintai ke produk-produk sawit dari negara-negara produksi sawit. Nah ini kan perlu pemikiran bapak-bapak yang memang bisa menentukan kebijakan. Ada tidak? Mengapa tidak dilakukan seperti perusahaan? Petani sawit kami di Kalbar itu, Bu, hampir 90.000 hektar, Pak. Kalau di jumlah itu mungkin berapa persen dari 6 juta itu petani sawit swadaya. Mungkin hanya itu. Sekali lagi, kita sekarang berbicara tidak usah di hulu terus. Karena kami berpikir opini digiring ke kayak kami seperti bapak-bapak dan kakek-kakek kami dulu. Sekarang cobalah digiringnya ke hilir. Terakhir, kami memakai produk pupuk karena sekarang pupuk mahal, Pak. Mohon maaf, pupuk mahal di Indonesia, subsidi untuk petani sawit tidak ada. Pupuk itu tidak ada, dicabut sama pemerintah, tidak tahu jelas atau apa alasannya. Kita sekarang kembali ke pupuk ramah lingkungan. Kami memakai produksi pupuk produk dalam negeri. Jenis pupuknya, mohon maaf ini bukan sponsor, bukan. Karena ini memang kenyataan. Saya dokumennya ada dari mulai pemupukan, sebulan kemudian buah itu muncul, 3 bulan kemudian buah itu masih ada, dan itu ada statementnya di kami. Terima kasih. Jenis pupuknya pupuk paten, Bu. Terima kasih. Bila taufiq wal hidayah. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
I mentioned, thank you so much for the questions, Pak, from Kapuas Hulu ya. Saya juga akan mencoba menjawab dalam bahasa Indonesia saja supaya Bapak memahami. Saya pendamping petani sebenarnya, Pak. Jadi saya pendamping petani sebenarnya sudah terutama 8 tahun saya berada di pendampingan di Kalimantan Barat, banyaknya di Kabupaten Sintang dan Kapuas Hulu. Jadi memang ada beberapa pilot plot atau demonstration plot yang saya buat khususnya untuk di Sintang dan di Kabupaten Pelalawan di Sumatera dengan 15 bulan pendampingan. Alhamdulillah peningkatan produktivitas petani di sana 20-30% meningkat dengan better management practices atau GAP. Jadi yang I want to highlight that's it's empowerment, pendampingan itu really important untuk para petani, dan saya akan tetap mendampingi petani sebenarnya dalam konteks di tapak dan juga memberikan lesson learn, pembelajaran dari apa yang sudah dilakukan di tingkat tapak untuk kita bagikan kepada rekan-rekan para stakeholders, terutama government, untuk kita seperti tadi yang Bapak bilang tidak hanya berpikir kepada hulu tapi juga hilir. Sudah kita mulai bagaimana tidak hanya konteks input, agro input, tapi juga market termasuk FFB price dan lain sebagainya. Jadi kita bisa komunikasi lagi Pak untuk bisa sama-sama dapat pembelajaran lesson dari Kapuas Hulu. Terima kasih.
Terima kasih.